So I, 44 female, have been married to my husband, 50 male, for about a year now. He has been married before and has a 26-year-old daughter from his previous marriage, Katie. My husband raised Katie on his own because her mother had passed away shortly after her birth due to pre-existing medical conditions that had been exacerbated by the pregnancy. She couldn't make it, unfortunately, and my husband had to do it all on his own. Now, you would expect that it would make Katie a little more grateful for what she had, right? Well, that's not how it worked at all with her, and instead she became a really selfish, bratty monster who nobody liked. My husband tried his best to make her a good person, but unfortunately Katie had her grandmother in her corner. My mother-in-law, Pamela, also played a huge role in raising Katie and spoiled her to bits. She was the textbook, overbearing, cloying grandmother who would do anything for her granddaughter, regardless of whether it was good for her in the long run or not. So I would honestly say that she was the one who was responsible for spoiling her and making her act like a total brat. Katie knows nothing about life, and yet for some reason she thinks she knows everything. I really tried my best to like Katie, but she was the one who made it almost impossible for me to get along with her. You see, she had made it up in her head that her father deserved better than me. So when he brought me home to meet them all, she was not impressed, and neither was her grandmother. That was almost 3 years ago, and since then, nothing has changed. Sure enough, they could never say anything to my face, but I knew they didn't like me. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out because they pretty much gave it all away with their behavior around me. Lucky for me, I don't really care about whether people like me or not. I tried to be nice to her initially, but when I noticed that my efforts were going in vain, I stopped trying to be her friend. I had also tried to be nice to Pamela, but she also made it clear that she was never going to be accepting of me, and in her head, her son would always deserve somebody better, and who knows, maybe my husband can do better. I'm not saying I'm the best, but honestly, even if someone better did come along, they would probably drive her away with their psychotic and crazy behavior. And even apart from that, I was the one who my husband had decided to be with, and we were in love. The bare minimum that they could do was be respectful of that, but even that seems like an impossible task for them. Because after a year ago, when we announced our engagement, Katie and Pamela completely lost their minds and tried their best to break us apart. Of course, they did not succeed, and I highly doubt that they ever will. After we announced our engagement, Katie completely lost it and showed up at our house one day without notice. My husband and I were both at home that day, and she had a complete breakdown. She screamed at her father and said that he had no right to ruin their family like this by marrying someone like me. When I asked her what she meant by someone like me, she went down to elaborate and said that I was a woman of loose morals and character. And apparently I was just a gold digger according to her. I don't even know where that was coming from because I was doing just fine financially before I even met my husband, and money was pretty much the last thing that I would want from a partner. I guess she thought that I was poor only because I didn't exactly have a typically high-paying job. For context, I am a self-employed artist and I work on commission. I am self-taught and I have been working ever since I graduated from college. I'll admit it was not easy in the beginning, but now I have carved a niche for myself and I'm doing pretty great. I make a decent amount of money every month, and I would say that I'm comfortable, and I'm definitely doing well enough not to depend on a man for money. So for her to even imply anything of the sort was disgusting and low. And I made it very clear to my husband that I could not remain in touch with him anymore. My husband also agreed that Katie had taken it way too far that day, and disliking me was one thing, but implying that I was a gold digger and that I used to hook up with men so that my lifestyle could be taken care of was a horrible thing to say about me. He decided to cut her off that day and also went low contact with Pamela. I would have demanded that he go no contact with her as well, but unfortunately Pamela is kind of old, and I couldn't in good conscience tell him to cut ties with his elderly mother. So about a week after our engagement, my husband and I stopped speaking to Katie. He would still continue to visit his mother, but after that point, it was only he who would visit her, and I wouldn't see her because I wanted nothing to do with them. They had already made it very obvious to me that they didn't want me around, so I was just doing my part and staying away from them. Neither of them had been invited to the wedding because we were already not on speaking terms with Katie, and Pamela had said that she would not want to attend the wedding if her granddaughter wasn't invited. So that settled things, and neither of them attended the wedding. I was okay with it. My husband seemed upset for a little while, but then he seemed to get over it. That was almost a year ago, and about 2 months after our wedding, we heard from a couple of people that apparently Katie had gotten married in secret just a couple of months before we got married. She and her boyfriend from college got hitched in secret and announced it after our wedding. Of course, we had not been invited to the ceremony either, and it was just them and a couple of their close friends who were present there. My husband took it really hard because that was his only daughter who got married without him. She had not even tried to reach out to him, and that's what broke his heart. I felt really bad for him as well because had I been in his place, I probably would have felt the same way. After the news broke, he even reached out to her to congratulate her, but she never responded to that message. He told me that he was happy for her because he knew that the guy that she married would keep her happy. We would only get to know about her and what she was up to from other people. Apparently, they had bought a house together and were quite happy. My husband told me that he would maintain his distance, and honestly, if Katie had reached out to us, then I would have been willing to forgive her for everything. But she didn't, and it was just about a week ago when I received a call from my mother-in-law, and I learned that Katie and her husband were getting a divorce. That was shocking because it had been just a year since their marriage, and apparently the divorce had been in the works for the past 3 months and a little more. Now that the waiting period was over, since we live in Colorado, the divorce had been finalized, and unfortunately for Katie, her husband had taken the house. It was fair, honestly, because she was the one who had cheated on him. Apparently she didn't think that emotional cheating counted as anything, and that had been her entire defense. She had been exchanging messages with a guy from work and had confessed that she had feelings for him. But apparently she believes that since she had never acted upon it, it shouldn't have been held against her. These are not even my words. This is what she said to us. It was appalling that at her age, she could be that stupid and ruin her own marriage like that. But there was also the fact that she had nowhere to go since her ex had taken over the house and she had lost a lot of her money in the divorce. She was already a pretty big spendthrift and was not one for saving money. She was very financially irresponsible, so it was no big surprise that getting a divorce and having to handle all her expenses on her own had pretty much driven her to bankruptcy. She told us that she would not be able to afford rent for a couple of months, and she wanted to save up her money before she moved out. So she needed us to help her out and let her live with us. This conversation took place a couple of weeks ago, around the time that Pamela had called to inform me of the divorce and had asked my husband and I to come over so we could speak to Katie in person. After the divorce, which she had told nobody about, she had moved out of the house and had been living with Pamela for a couple of days, but the commute from her house to Katie's workplace was becoming increasingly difficult and time-consuming. Our home, however, was a lot closer, and that's why Katie wanted to fix her relationship with us and move in. That day at Paula's house, Katie told us that she really was sorry about the way that she had behaved. She confessed that she had a bit of an ego problem and couldn't handle the fact that I was my own person and wasn't bending over backwards to cater to her needs like she had been used to all her life. Throughout her childhood, Pamela and my husband had made sure that her needs were always met, and she never had to lack anything in her life. They made the impossible possible for her. So she had learned to have really unrealistic and crazy expectations from life in general. And after becoming an adult, she realized that's not really how the world works. So now, after her divorce, she had come to realize that not everybody was going to be as forgiving as a family, and she had to make her peace with that. She told us that she was already really depressed because in spite of whatever she did, she really loved her ex, and it was really hard to accept the fact that she had lost him because of her own stupidity. She said that she didn't want to lose her family as well and wanted to do right by us, which is why she wanted us to give her one chance to make everything all right again. We didn't know what to say that day because she had put us on the spot. So I told her that I needed some type of thing because of the things that she had said about the way that she had behaved with me, but something that I couldn't just move on so easily from. And even now, she was only approaching us because she needed something and not because she was actually sorry, even though she insisted that she meant her apology. But anyway, after some argument, we decided that we would take some time to think about it and then let her know. Until then, she could continue to work from home since she had already spoken to her employer about it. My husband and I were really in a dilemma and had no idea what to do. We had decided that we would at least try to build some sort of a normal relationship before we let her move in with us because that would be a huge deal. So we kept in touch for a few weeks before we came to a conclusion, and in those few weeks, Katie was on her best behavior and was trying to impress me and take back everything. I have to say, for a couple of days, I really thought that she had started to change. She was being really nice to me, and after a couple of weeks had passed, when she asked me again if I was willing to let her move in with us now, I said yes. I had already discussed it with my husband, and he was open to the idea anyway. He was just waiting for me to come around. So when I finally did come around, Katie was thrilled, and she even called me up to let me know that I would not regret this. And the next day, she showed up with all her bags and stuff. My husband and I had both taken a day off to welcome her and make sure that everything is all right. But before she had even set foot inside the house, she brought out a few documents and said that we needed to sign the paperwork before she moved in. We were really confused because we didn't think that any legal paperwork was required for an informal arrangement. When we went through the papers, my husband and I realized that she wanted a 50% claim on our property that we had purchased with our own money. This house that we were living in, my husband and I had bought when we first moved in together, and that was almost 2 years ago. Katie had nothing to do with that, and she had absolutely no contribution towards it. So I couldn't even imagine why she would think that we would simply agree to this. When I returned those papers to her and asked her what she meant by this, she told me very casually that she had her lawyer draw up a little something for her because she just wanted to make sure that she couldn't be kicked out of this house like she had been kicked out of her ex-husband's house. I was speechless when she said that, and my husband took over the conversation and told her that this wouldn't be necessary because this was not going to be a permanent arrangement anyway. So there was no need for her to involve legal paperwork in this. In fact, she herself claimed that this was not going to be a permanent thing and she just needed a few. She just needed to trust us. But Katie, like the true blue idiot that she is, decided to say the worst thing possible. She told my husband that she trusted him implicitly, but she wasn't very sure about me, and that was really the reason why she had believed that it was necessary for her to get this in writing. And she told us very firmly that she wouldn't be setting foot in our house unless we signed the documents. I was stunned, and before my husband could say anything, I decided that I would put an end to this. I told Katie as sweetly as I could that since she didn't trust me enough to live with me, she could find someplace else to live. Better yet, she could just go back to Pamela and live with her like she had been all these past few weeks. There was no need for her to stay with us. She was right about not being able to trust me. After my little speech, I slammed the door shut in her face. I expected my husband to say something about it, but even he didn't seem to care because he knew that Katie had crossed the line with me and it was simply unacceptable. So we went back into the living room while Katie shouted at us from the outside and cried about how I was being unfair to her. But I didn't care about any of it because I was seething, and it took all that I had to not go out and smack some sense into her. After screaming at us for a little while, she left, and it was just me and my husband again. We didn't expect anything to happen that day, but we knew that there would be repercussions to this. We had expected Pamela to be really upset about this, and she was, which she let us know the very next day. She called up my husband and screamed at him for about an hour about how the two of us had insulted Katie and said that we needed to apologize to her and take her back. My husband argued with his mother for about an hour before he finally gave up trying and cut the call himself. He told me that he had blocked both of them, so there was no way that they could contact us again, but they found ways. They decided that they were going to make their relatives contact us instead. Now, my husband is not exactly close with his family because they are really weird and dramatic. He just doesn't mix well with them. But for some reason, all of them believed that it was their place to come and talk to him about what had happened with Katie. Everyone's been texting us and saying that I overreacted and that I owe Katie a huge apology. To them, she's just a child who has been a little paranoid, and reasonably so, since she just got kicked out of her house by her ex-husband and can't bring herself to trust people easily again. Apparently, everyone thinks that we need to be more accommodating of her and her feelings instead of vilifying her for it. First of all, I don't even know how people are calling her a child because she is literally 26. I don't think that qualifies as a child in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, but sure, she is the victim here. And more importantly, I think everyone's conveniently forgetting the fact that she had been kicked out of the house because she had been cheating on her husband. Now, I don't know about other people, but to me, that sounds like a pretty fair reason to get kicked out. Things have been really difficult to deal with because everyone is hounding us. Me especially. AITA for kicking my stepdaughter out because she wanted to have 50% ownership of our house. Update 1. Hi, first of all, thank you so much for commenting on my original post and letting me know how much I am not a TA. I already knew that, but honestly, the way that my husband's family has been behaving would put anyone in a tizzy over it. Anyway, now that's clear, my husband and I decided to block everybody who had been texting us. It was a difficult process because there were a lot of people who he had to remove from our lists, and people could refer to it as a mass blocking process of sorts. But yes, to sum it up, we have gotten rid of anyone and everyone who was trying to make us look like the villain just for standing up for ourselves. We can safely assume that Pamela and Katie are probably furious right now, but unfortunately, they have no way of contacting us, so we will never know for sure. After my post here, my husband and I had a serious discussion about this, and he told me that Katie had always been spoiled and entitled, but it had reached a level where even he couldn't handle it anymore. Despite being her father, he told me that he felt guilty for treating her like this since she was his only child, but I reassured him that if he gave in to all her demands, he would be no better than Pamela. He was actually doing her a favor by trying to mold her into a better person, and he should be proud of himself for that. I don't have any kids of my own, but I knew that if I had any, I would love for them to have a father like my husband. That seemed to pacify him a little, and now we are hoping that Katie takes the hint and tries to become a better person. Update 2. So Katie decided to pay us a visit today. Thankfully, I was not at home at the time, and I only caught them when they were leaving. I had to finish up my work at the studio today, so I was a little late. When I pulled up, I noticed Katie and Pamela getting into her car, and they looked really upset. It was only after they left that I came out of my car and went inside the house. My husband was sitting on the couch and he also looked worked up, and I knew that there had been a fight. He was all red in the face, which only happens when he has been screaming about something. So I knew instantly that his mother and daughter must have said something to set him off. When I asked him what was going on, he told me that they had come to visit him under the pretext of fixing things with us. Apparently, they had contacted him from a different number when he was at work and said that they were waiting right outside our house. So he rushed back home from work to talk to them, and he expected them to apologize because that's what they had said they would do on the phone. But when he reached home and once they were inside, Katie started talking about how she was ready to forgive him even though he hadn't even apologized yet. But she was not okay with me being around anymore. She had said that she had apparently put up with me for long enough, but now I was overstepping, and I had no right to do so because I was not her real mother. So she expected my husband to talk to me and acknowledge the fact that I had screwed up by insulting her when she came over the other day and apologized to her. When my husband told her that I was perfectly within reason to react the way that I did, she started to argue with him and said that he was only taking my side because he was too scared to stand up to me. She accused him of being a coward and said that she was ashamed of having a father like him who couldn't even stand up to his own flesh and blood. So that turned into a full-blown argument, and my husband informed her that she was in the wrong here, so she didn't exactly need anybody to stand up for her. And more importantly, she already had Pamela on her side, and her grandmother was going to support her no matter what she did, no matter how messed up it all was. So my husband also ended up saying that he was more ashamed than she was of having a horrible daughter like her. It was really sad because at that point both Pamela and Katie started crying, and they insisted that apparently I was responsible for this behavior. They believed that I had turned him against them by poisoning him and making him believe that they were terrible people. They were trying their best to manipulate him with their tears, but it was not working because my husband had already seen these things before he was impervious to them. They continued to cry for a little while, probably hoping that he would interject and say something or maybe apologize to them for hurting their feelings. But my husband didn't say a word and just continued to glare at them while they shed their crocodile tears. After almost 15 minutes of crying, Katie called my husband heartless and said that she couldn't believe that he was just going to let them cry and not even say anything about it to make them feel better. When my husband said that he knew what they were up to and said that these tactics were not going to work on him, she got even more offended and said that these were not tactics, but she was just genuinely upset that he, as a father, was refusing to take accountability for his behavior and make things right with her again. She blamed him entirely for allowing me to insult her, and she even played her mom card and said that apparently her mother would be disappointed in the way that he was treating his family now. That's what set him off on a rampage, and he ended up saying everything that he had been bottling up for so many years. He called Katie the worst person ever and said that if her mother even had a clue as to what a horrible person she had turned out to be, she probably would have chosen to remain buried underground because nobody would want to have a daughter like her. I personally thought that was a little harsh, but honestly, the way that the two of them have been pushing my husband and backing him into a corner for the longest time, I'm surprised that he didn't snap earlier. Somebody with my patience probably would have cracked way before he did. I honestly think it's commendable that he was able to avoid this meltdown for so long, but it was long overdue, and it finally happened today, just before I came back home. He had been yelling at Pamela for ruining his daughter, and he told her that now that she had finally made her into the awful kind of person that she wanted, she could take responsibility herself and keep him out of it. That's what they had been fighting about just before I came back home, and the two of them decided to leave because they had had enough. And honestly, so has my husband. I calmed him down after they left, and we got our finest bottle of wine to celebrate the fact that he had finally laid out all of his feelings. and he wasn't going to have to deal with this drama in a long time. I think that's pretty celebration worthy. Update 3. Hi guys, it's been almost a year since I last posted here, and wow, I can't believe how different my life was back then. I just randomly thought of this account a couple of days ago, and it took me a while to remember the credentials, but I managed to log in today. So a little update for you guys. Katie is still living with Pamela from what we know, and thankfully they are staying far away from us. They did not try to contact us after that huge blow up with my husband, and I am honestly very grateful for that. My husband and I had a pretty uneventful couple of months after that, but then we decided to adopt a dog. Having kids was out of the question for us, obviously, because I was really never interested in having children. And I think I'm at an age where my body would not be able to support a pregnancy either without endangering me. We did think about fostering a child or a teenager, but I honestly don't think that either of us is emotionally or mentally prepared for that yet. But a dog? Yeah, that was perfect. Now, I know that we shouldn't compare kids to animals and pets and stuff like that. But honestly, ever since we rescued our 3-year-old golden retriever from the pound, life has changed for us. His name is Bob because we thought it was a funny name. He has brought us a lot of joy, and we are really grateful that he chose us as his parents. We post about him all the time, and the funniest thing is that a couple of days ago, a friend of mine told me that he follows Katie, and she had tweeted something about being replaced and stuff. And even though we can't prove it because she never mentioned a dog or anything, we were pretty sure that she was talking about Bob. To think that she was jealous of a dog was a hilarious thought, and I could barely stop laughing when I first heard about it. The saddest thing is that I think my husband probably would have forgiven her if she had just had the decency to apologize. I mean, of course, she is his only kid, and I know that it can't be easy for him to live life apart from his only daughter. But he has to do it, and I honestly think that it's Katie's fault. I just wish that she had apologized and Pamela had actually forced her granddaughter to be a good person for once. But whatever, my husband and I are happy, and we spend our days with Bob. Life is good. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.